It's nice to do one building. It's nice to do 2 or 3 buildings that are like that. But what you really need is your entire city, ultimately your entire country. I'm just going to start with the work that was done about 14 years ago. We've been now at this for about 20 years in the firm. And it was the decarbonization of the city of Chicago for the 2030 action plan that was all signed up in the Paris Accord. That led us to the platform that I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation. In 2008, 2009, we did a study to remove 3.9 million metric tons of carbon from the city of Chicago and published that study in a book that we were lucky enough to get a national award for. And in the process of doing that, we literally unpacked the city by understanding the kind of interrelationships between a series of systems that make up any city. We found a lot of information at that time as it related to mixed use, the importance of kind of creating neighborhoods and creating education as a part of that platform, and sharing that knowledge about how things really work. Because this is fairly complex, back then we wrote a parametric model that afforded us to run scenarios to test different options for how we could actually achieve these goals. And I think one of the most important things that we can take from this conference, because I think almost everybody in this room understands the importance of what we need to do, what we really need to be focused on is how exactly are we going to do that? How do we actually get this done? And so this was a step-by-step program in the 280 pages that explained how Chicago could actually get this done. In the end, we understood that we can certainly densify our cities as populations grow around the world while still making them sustainable. We can actually increase or use architecture as a platform for sustainability, and that the interrelationship of all things that are built is really critical to our understanding, not just in our physical space, but on a global kind of standard. Most recently, in 2020, 2021, we were honored to do the Al Wasl Plaza for Expo 2020. I'm showing you this slide here because as part of that, we understand the transformation of technology, and you've heard a lot about this yesterday. You hear a lot about it more today, I'm sure. And when we started our firm in 2006, there was no iPhone. That almost sounds impossible. The iPhone came out in 2007. That is almost unbelievable for me to think about living without an iPhone today. We had Blackberries back then. Some may remember those, some may not. But what this is really important for us to understand is the trajectory of technology and the impact that it has on our design. We were, as I said, fortunate and honored to do the Legacy Master Plan at the Expo 2020, which is now Expo City. We wrote the sustainable guidelines for that. We are also invited to participate on the centerpiece of the Expo, which is the Al Wasl Plaza, which I just learned got entered into the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest outdoor performance immersive space. We did all the KPIs. You've heard about the key performance indicators before. And we wrote the standards for what it meant to be genuinely sustainable for that project. The proof of that project was the Al Wasl Plaza, which, for those of you who haven't been there, is a 130-meter dome space with a central park surrounded by 5 buildings, 3 office buildings, and 2 hotels. While we strive to be sustainable and we strive to be carbon intelligent, let's say, we also strive for hopefully beautiful things. We argue that there are 2 aspects of the projects that will never occur if we don't achieve these goals. One is beauty, and one is economic sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, we don't mean just environmental sustainability. We mean cultural sustainability, social sustainability. Clearly, energy and embodied carbon plays a role, and we also talk about beauty, because we believe that as we build cities for others and the children that are growing up today, they need to grow up in places of beauty. We achieved a numerous set of goals for this project, all of which now are existing just about 2 hours from here in Dubai. And throughout the process of the expo, the Al Wasl Plaza kind of came to life with the 21 million who passed through the expo and the tens of thousands who engaged in that space. The goals of the project are now in place. There were some amazing things that we were able to achieve on that project, but I think most importantly is the achievement of the reduction of water in Dubai. These buildings use, as you can see on the slide, approximately 73% less potable water than the typical building that is now currently under design. These are the kind of standards that we expect of our projects moving forward. We know they're attainable. And I just want to say one thing about the myth of the cost of sustainability. There are a couple of things that I think are important to understand. We argue that the cost of sustainability, or cost of true sustainable design, is no different than a regular building. These buildings were delivered with the exact same budget that we were given when we started, and we did not have these goals when we started. The difference is when you try to make something that it genuinely is not. If you try to do it after the fact, or you try and push sustainable design or embodied carbon design on a project where it doesn't really belong in the first place, or you didn't really think about it in its original intent. I argue it's trying to like taking a regular car here and taking it to the F1 track and hoping somehow that it's going to win the race at 220 miles an hour. It's almost an impossible feat. When we think about the future and we think about where we want to go with embodied carbon, this is the project I'd like to talk to you about today. Again, we have been very fortunate to be engaged by Magnum Properties, who is a developer in Cairo. They came to us and asked us to basically push the limits of what we think the built environment can provide in terms of energy and carbon. And so we defined this path as toward net zero carbon. And when we talk about net zero carbon, we're talking about life cycle embodied carbon, which includes the entire full spectrum of material sourcing, all of the construction, the building obviously itself, and the entire life of the operational cycle of the building. And so we tested this for the last year, almost a year and a half now. We are on track to achieve some incredible goals with this project. We are at about 58% reduction in embodied carbon, as you can see. A 46% reduction in energy use of this building, which, by the way, is a 100,000 square meter, 55-story, 230-meter office building. About 74% reduction in water use, and about 25% of the power of this building comes from the facade, which is an embedded solar facade. And we can talk later, if we had more time, about how we actually achieve that by reducing sunshades, but integrating the sunshades and the photovoltaics actually in the wall itself. As part of this, we're pursuing the notion of liquid hydrogen. In terms of the life cycle and getting to full net zero, we're pursuing the concept of feeding hydrogen as a source of energy for the building through the photovoltaics, and that is also panning out. This slide is really talking about where we are with this building relative to the best buildings that are performing out there. One of our buildings is just to the left of this slide. The three that you see from the left moving toward the right are buildings that are out there around the world right now, and the top is 1,200 kind of output from the facade. We are about 5,000 in terms of what we're outputting, about 4 times what is currently out there as the best performing building from a photovoltaic facade. What does this mean? This means that as we think about the degradation of photovoltaics or photovoltaic panels over their life, as we think about the grid kind of getting better or cleaner over time, as we think about operational carbon and how we can offset that by using renewable energy such as hydrogen and the photovoltaics, we can analyze and calculate, literally, both through digital twins, but also through just the science behind the building itself, that we can achieve net zero carbon as defined today. Now, we are looking at a number of products like this for the commercial market. We're being asked to look at residential products as well for the client. And the question you asked is, how exactly did we get here? When we think about projects like Al Wasl, for example, or the buildings at Al Wasl, the first thing we do in our work is not the renewable energy. It's actually the last thing we do. the first thing we do is design the buildings and site the buildings so they're very well protected and very well shaded. When we work in Kazakhstan, we turn the building up toward the sun to get as much heat absorption as possible. When we work in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, we're trying to shade the building as much as possible. When we think about creating sunshades with photovoltaics on them, the embodied carbon of that idea is much higher than kind of what we call blending the systems together. So instead of having an exterior wall, a sunshade, and then photovoltaics on the sunshade, we put it all in one system. And what we did was we embedded the photovoltaics, which is not a new technology, into the glass, and then used that photovoltaic as a sunshade for the facade. So there is no extra kind of additional structures to hold up the photovoltaics. This is also a vertical building, which is very hard to have horizontal photovoltaics on a vertical building. In addition, when we think about operational costs and we think about savings in terms of cleaning the building, which we measure over its life, it's much easier to clean a flat, clean glass facade than it is to go around a sunshade, clean the sunshade, clean the photovoltaics, etc. What you're looking at here is a different set of diagrams around the facade itself. You can see the photovoltaics embedded in the glass, and the diagrams that you see in color on the left-hand side are where these facades are located on the building itself. We like to create art and hopefully beauty in the science when we design, and so this becomes the kind of, I hate to say it, but mashrabiyah, the kind of language of patterns of the psychology of comfort in this space that we love to see when we walk under trees or when we walk behind screens. Those kinds of patterns we think are beautiful kinds of experiences in commercial office space. The facade itself transforms depending on its orientation. It's different. That means as it goes around the building. And so when you get to the places like the elevator core, it's far more solid than it is on the vision glass. There's an atrium in this building that's 54 stories in height that's working to create air movement and vertical stack for us. And we have a language around this performance that we think is creating very unique solutions. The beauty of the sustainable work, if you are genuine to your site, if you are genuine to the culture, if you're genuine to the purpose and uses of the projects, is you can't help but design something that's different. It is, by definition, different. And so we're not applying sustainability or the ideas behind embodied carbon to our projects. We're embedding them in the design. It is the essence of the building itself. Just like us, we don't apply our systems to our bodies. They are who we are. And although we might be very different in terms of how we appear, the DNA of who we are as species of human beings is quite similar. We use a lot of technology, as you can imagine, to study these projects. We've been asked to integrate a host of things. And what we do is we track cost, energy, embodied carbon as we design constantly from the outset. All of the consultants are up front when we begin the project. And so as we create these designs, we're measuring and kind of balancing this kind of equation around carbon, aesthetics, and cost. What you're seeing is also the integration of landscape in certain areas, and I want to be very clear about this. We, as architects, and I heard it yesterday from Sarah, which was great to hear, we struggle with this constant myth. And the myth is that if you put photovoltaics on a building and you put trees on a building, it means it's green. And nothing could be more false. That is just absolutely not true. It's the systems and what the building has behind that that makes it sustainable. As I said, the photovoltaics in this case were last. Not the first thing we start with, the last thing we start with. We're measuring daylight quality, we're measuring the essence of the space from a psychological comfort standpoint, and we integrate landscape because we think the landscape on the terraces would be beautiful experiences for those who occupy the space. It has retail for the first 2 floors and a beautiful retail atrium at the center of the space. I won't get too embedded into the technical jargon of what we do. We have a pretty robust carbon lab group that works with us in our office. And Dr. Chris Drew, who's the head of our sustainability platform, is actually an ecologist, a Liverpool-educated PhD who spent 7 years in Abu Dhabi out in the desert studying foxes. He was actually the head of sustainability for Masdar City in 2006, 2007. And when we finished the design for the headquarters there, he came with us to Chicago. and has been there ever since. So we're running ecological platforms, we're running carbon-embedded platforms, energy as well, and we're also taking a very deep dive into material sourcing and how we can transform the industries of, obviously, concrete, steel. We heard a little bit about that yesterday, aluminum. I remember in 2007 at Masdar, there was actually a study by Alcan that proved aluminum to be the same embodied carbon as bamboo. So we know how to do it. We just have to wait for the market to catch up in some cases. The operational carbon in this building is a 46% reduction. We're going to look at how we can now go out into the market and solicit those who are interested in helping us build this project and get it delivered in Cairo. We're very interested, obviously, in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and in Riyadh. We're there talking about this project and meeting those who are interested in participating with us. And I think the message I want to leave you with, which for us is critical, is a transformation of what was discussed yesterday as the reform of financial platforms. We believe that because the technology is continuing to transform, the markets are continuing to transform, and we now have the science behind doing buildings like this, that in time we will convert buildings from users to contributors. This building is now contributing to the infrastructure of Cairo. It is now reforming how the infrastructure is considered, and it's reforming the financial model behind this real estate. It is a different equation between what is being done now and what was being done even 2 or 3 years ago. We believe that if we take the systems approach, which you saw in Chicago for the decarb plan, and apply it to buildings like this, and then turn around and re-engineer the life cycle of the infrastructure in any city, you can then transform the buildings as part of that infrastructure and transform the entire city. For sustainability through the built environment. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your aid.